Good morning and good afternoon. Happy Monday, LinkedIn friends. It is time for another episode of Value First Measurement with Danielle. How you doing, Danielle?
I'm doing great. Happy Monday.
Indeed. Turning into a nice measurement Monday here.
Ooh,
Lead scoring with Casey and now deep measurement conversations with you. Uh, Not the way people are probably used to, though. You're not gonna see a lot of like, well, this is how we build these 10 dashboards out so that we can tell the perfect story um, to deaf ears. Sorry, getting a little bit ahead of myself here. Last week we started this thing talking about uh, can we please move beyond like attribution wars and figure out how to measure collective impact. That's mindset number one that we've got to get everybody into. Uh,
mhm.
Everything after kind of like piles on to what you need to accomplish once you've created that space. And today we're talking about um, the evidence standards in the games we have to play internally when we're talking about marketing budget, sales budget, operations budget. This concept was actually the beginning of this pillar because I saw somebody talk about how they created this elaborate new way to tell the story of how marketing is impacting the organization. And I just thought back to all the sessions I had been in internally where sales doesn't have to do that.
No.
So should we keep playing that game or how can we not play the game, basically? I don't know. What
Yeah.
goes through your mind when I just describe that horror story?
Well, I'm thinking about it funny enough, in terms of attribution, because sales is usually the last touch before a sale, or at least on paper, that's what everybody thinks is true. Maybe the last touch is that they're in a deal room, which is a platform that marketing owns because they've created the look and feel. So, is that technology? Whose budget is that going to go to? Who gets to claim that they closed that sale if technically where they signed in the dotted line was a platform that's managed by marketing? And like at the end of the day, we just want to not do that. But like when we start to conceptualize it and contextualize it to what we already know and how we talk about things, marketing attribution is just in marketing. And we talk about all these different touch points and all the things that happen along a customer journey. And we've, beaten this into submission and levels of granularity that it was never designed to get to. And we've created our own prison where we're trying to measure things that don't always exist, or are often inaccurate or incomplete data, and trying to derive meaning from it. So if we can just take three giant steps back, you get journey attribution within your organization, which is not something I'm championing. Like, you should not be doing this either. But at least we can start to understand how we got to this point, because if it starts in marketing and you get an MQL and then it hands off to sales and then it hands off to CS, then the last person who was emailing the contact on the deal is the person getting the credit. And we've created sales structures around that with, spiffs and quotas and commission structures and all of these things that just keep reinforcing that structure. And so marketing is not part of that calculation, and sales is not part of the sort of pre-funnel calculation, and CS isn't part of any of that. They just do their own thing entirely, and sometimes they create deals or sometimes they upsell. But really, it's all layered together where, hopefully you could even bring your CS rep into the conversation before the deal is closed. Like, here's the person that's going to help you make sense of this thing that you're investing a lot of money in. And, marketing people aren't going to be on your call, but they might have been in the webinar, hosting the webinar that they watched last week to get a deep technical dive so their engineers can get onboarded quickly. Like, it all sort of layers together in ways that you might not think about. And so we're towing that line between, can we measure all of those layers at once and parse them out so that we can defend budgets and show ROI? But also, can we tell that story in a way that is not slicing pieces up and passing them off in different directions?
Oh man, if there's anything that tells us how bad this problem is, like zero prep, zero alignment prior to the show about what we're talking about. We get together like a few minutes and then go live. And that was brilliant. Might as well just end it right there. Like this,
Done.
that was
Great
all
talk.
the
See
things
you next week.
because we experience it every damn day,
Yeah.
like right now. And it's so painful to watch because almost every person, even on the sales side, who is involved in these situations, they know how ridiculous like all of this is.
Yeah.
Right. And you mentioned like the sales quotas and the KPIs,
Mhm.
and a lot of that coming from, on high from the investors, from the board, who's just
Mhm.
like, this is the way it's always been done. This is the way the unicorns did it. So I
Yep.
guess we got to do that. Um, and the example I have uh, coming from manufacturing, it's like how hard it truly is to like get the things done and move the needle. As I like to do projects related to like B2B order portals and like self-serve situations, since that's website generally, marketing is
Mhm.
responsible for that. When we go through the sales process, and even in this case, there was a growth team where it
Mhm.
was marketing and sales working together. But guess what? There wasn't a growth budget. There was still a marketing budget and a sales budget. And even though all of the value props related to why we need to do this thing are it will save the sales team so much time, like 600 emails a month with the best customers, getting them to
Mhm.
reorder. It will save the service team. Still, it somehow became marketing's budget, and we never got to move forward with it.
Mm.
And
That's so
it's like
frustrating.
literally nonsensical for how we
Right.
approach this stuff. And how can you like that's what we're trying to say. Like the game is broken. And the fact that an organization can see it that way. And as soon as that's why when we started the agency, I was like, I'm not calling myself like a marketing agency. Like,
Yeah.
get the hell out of here. Like, I want a chance at any budgets.
Right.
Like, right. But that was a good example of even though on the surface we can call each other the growth team and we can have growth meetings, when it doesn't change at that budget level, at the P&L level, like, and it makes sense, right? Like it's very easy
Yeah.
to put the dots together. Like, okay, P&L is this, sales is responsible for this, and we give them commissions. So the dollars are all there going in and out. If we see it lower, we've got to invest, and we can't even ask questions as to why. We hire new heads and we go to new events, and what sales wants, sales gets. And as long as they deliver a better bottom line, like they traditionally they just kind of get it. Um,
Right.
Meanwhile, we show up from a marketing perspective and can enable all these things that are
Right.
required to do this. And it must be a different game. Otherwise, we would not still be talking about the challenges of attribution.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, your growth team example is so funny because as a scorned marketer who has been put under a CRO, like I can speak from experience that marketing in that case is held almost to sales goals at that point. Like instead of it being a whole team culture where we wipe the slate clean and start over with different ways of measurement and different goals that we're aiming at, it's then just like, all right, well, marketing generates leads and we hand them to sales. And then it's the salesperson saying marketing didn't generate enough leads. And so then it's like, wow, this is actually a million times worse than what we were trying to do before, where there was actually some, respect and understanding for the other activities that come into play. And your example of going to different conferences, you put field marketing in the mix in big enterprises. Field marketing's job is to create events that salespeople can show up at and sell things. And so coming back to that layering, like that wouldn't exist without marketing. Is that a marketing budget? Is that a sales budget? If we're helping sales hit quota because we take them to a suite at a Yankees game, then like what is happening? Why does that have to hit a marketing budget? And I think in those cases, especially in enterprises, it's a lot more um, it's granular in the spreadsheet management of the budgets, but there's some understanding of like how field marketing impacts sales differently. And that's why it's measured at a more granular level. So it's separated out. But when it comes to things like a deal room and that platform expenditure on who owns that as a product within your organization, who's the end user of that product within your organization, and then whose budget does that hit. If marketing or product marketing is going to be the person to own all of the documents and enable the process where the deal room becomes a virtual room with all of the materials that would help close a sale. Some of that comes from sales, like if they're drawing up quotes or proposals or whatever it may be, and some of that comes from contracting. But then the other side of it is the like product documentation that gets put forth in that. A product marketer is probably creating that. A product marketer might have been the ones to help, roll out a deal room. Is that going to hit a marketing budget? Is that a sales budget? Does sales even have budget? Like, does the platform cost get rolled into operations? And so I nearly failed financial accounting. So I am not the person to answer this on a P&L, but at the end of the day, when you have to fight for those budgets, sort of showing where that impact lands is like, well, it just happens. Like the revenue just comes in because it's a better experience to the end user, like the outside user. I'm like, why do we have to fight about this? Accounting is probably the answer, but I wouldn't know.
Right. Well, yeah. I think like if I could just cut to the chase, like, because I don't know how I'm learning how to bridge it right now with
Yeah.
value first. And like what's painful but also exciting is that all these traps just resonate like so hard with
Mhm.
everybody, but it still feels like boiling the ocean or like because it's transformation and not optimization.
Mhm.
And we need to find our way to a point where there is a customer team, there is an operations team, and there is finance. And
Yeah.
like that's the org structure.
Ooh,
And
I
I
love
think
that.
we see teams doing that, like Clay, for example, that just have a GTM engineer role that they could have sales experience, they could have product experience, they could have engineering, like whoever they are, as long as they know their shit. Like, let's get them in here. We can enable them with the system that we
Right.
put them in. And now we're just bringing in good people that understand it's not just them carrying the bag, right? Like the
Yeah.
idea of one person getting commission is insane right
Right.
now, unless that one person, which does happen in manufacturing all the time, like this is part of why companies struggle to transition from like building and growth to scale is because you often have the journeyman salespeople. They meet the person at the show and then they own the entire relationship,
Mhm.
right? Even there, as we've grown, there's so much enablement required from others in the organization. And
Right.
in a lot of cases, there's a lot of people getting paid great salaries. So it's so it's not a very constructive conversation to like break it down into commission versus not commission.
Mhm.
But as a leadership team, you've got to be able to show like this is the value everybody provides and this is the value everybody gets. Because at the
Mhm.
same time, we're hearing of great organizations, like Atlassian, where there is no commission. Like
Ugh,
it's just everybody gets
sounds
a
like a
great
dream.
salary and bonused.
Yeah. I feel like that's so motivating, and, like, we've just been stuck. We're in this trap of thinking that the way to do it is to, just keep pushing the way that we always have, but so much has changed. And I'm speaking very generally, but it's like there's so much that comes into this. Like cost of living is wild these days, and the way that people work is different, and how we're showing up at work and having AI assistants to be more efficient. And there's just so much that has changed in the past, say, 5 years, that changes fundamentally how people work. And then when you look at that from an organizational perspective, none of that has changed. Like there really has not been a whole lot of development in how you structure a company or how you break out budgets or how you're doing this, unless you hear of examples that are very unique, like Atlassian or Clay. It's just not the norm. And I hope we move towards that direction, but there's no framework for people to follow it. And that's really scary, especially if you're a company making big money and you want to do it right. There just isn't a lot of wiggle room to get it wrong. because then you make headlines and nobody wants to deal with you anymore. So you
Yeah.
kind of have to, you've got to follow the book to appease the general public, but hopefully we're at the grassroots of seeing that change.
Yeah. I think we are. I mean, that's why we're here.
Right.
Because like the education required to get there. I mean, a podcast I was listening to, um, you know, one of the winning by design
Mm.
like creators was from like Oracle. And like he helped create this infrastructure that we're talking about. And if people could just assign like the feelings every day and then go hear him talk about how it does not work anymore, right? Like how much more of a powerful statement do you need to hear?
Right.
And that's where, like you say, like winning by design is a data model and like, a process framework. It's
Mhm.
just such a like you can't separate the 6 models from each other. It's such a huge undertaking. And what we really need is, boards plus sales leaders
Mhm.
because it's painful to like get a leader on board like a CEO, but then they go to the board and they go to their sales leader and they're like the people that they've have the relationship with. And
Right.
it's like, well, I can't just say that they're wrong, like
Yeah.
because all we have is, oh, here's a bunch of immeasurable stuff that
Right.
are the reasons why you want to do that. So, are you finding any wins in these conversations? You mentioned you had something fresh on the mind. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I just had a conversation with a prospective client for us. And he was brand new to his marketing role. They're a pretty small company, people wise. And so it feels like there's a lot of flexibility here. Like we could really sway them here. But he's coming in as a marketer and he's like, I have no tools to accomplish even the most basic functions of marketing. And that's why they talk to me. But thinking about how can we structure his approach to marketing inside of the tools he does have access to, they're just not well set up, um, such that you see that end-to-end system, because the sort of complaint document that we started our conversation with in that call had sales, marketing, and CS. And so they're looking at these processes holistically already. Uh, and I was highlighting the different points where, marketing needs to bleed into sales and see these types of things. And how do we structure that in a way where everybody's on board with what's really happening? And when CS comes into the picture, how do we make sure that they're enabled to capture this information? How do they enter the equation? How do they see these alerts that they should even be involved? And so there's a lot of wiggle room with this prospective client to be able to build some of this in and blur those lines between the three teams and make sure that they're all working cohesively together. I don't know that I'm in a position yet to tell them to throw their KPIs out the window, but maybe we'll get there after I can fix their systems a bit.
yeah, um, it's a challenge for sure because these KPIs exist because of how measurable they are,
Right.
and uh, but when we have, there's hope when we see HubSpot as a platform allow us to create contacts in the system without email addresses based on social activity,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is a recognition that we need to go to market differently, that go to market is
Right.
changing, that there is real value in, I mean, the launch of Profoundly was such a great example in that we didn't have any email list,
Yeah.
right? We just had 30 experts that with the founders collectively had a follower list of 130,000 people,
I
right?
love that you took inventory there.
Like, I mean, I kind of had to
Right.
again to like prove
Yeah.
marketing. Like, yeah, it's like we're never free of it, right? Like,
Right.
because it's so hard to connect, and it has been hard to connect to the revenue dots. And it is a lot of work for the entire organization versus just marketers going to do the stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's where if you're struggling with from a marketing perspective, like, well, how do we do it differently if it's not the attribution path?
Mm-hmm.
It is a an intentional effort of capturing qualitative, feedback and then validating that with the rest of your team. I think one of the misses for most teams is doing regular, like, closed one debriefs,
Mhm.
right? There's so much information that people already know, and we just don't take the time to put it on paper, like, have a conversation about it because everybody's got a different viewpoint,
Right.
right? And instead of all, like, the lead meetings and, like, the pipeline meetings,
Mhm.
like, we could take a lot more stock in what's, like, proving, like, the real proof is people paying you money, like,
Right.
to become the customers, and if we don't take time to understand that, yet we spend so much damn time on, like, buyer intent and,
Mhm.
like, all this stuff that's just, like, really unknown. Like, there's no proof behind any of it.
Yeah.
There's a problem there.
Yeah. Well, I'm reflecting back to my corporate life too. I've been pretty out of the game, so maybe this is normal now. But if you have a salesperson who is, near the end of the quarter, they're in the last, say, 3, 4 weeks of the quarter, and they're trying to figure out how to pull some deals across the finish line or keep them from churning or, stop from losing them and they feel like they're hemorrhaging. What things did they think about doing to pull that across the finish line? Is it like, let's send them a branded gift basket? Is it like you can use something like Sendoso where you can let them sort of figure out what the gift should be and have that be impactful? Is it let's take them out to a dinner? Let's take them to a Yankees suite? Like what tricks are in their bag and how much of that is limited to what's available to them within their team and their budget? Because if you unlock what's available to them to be basically anything in the world, and that could be part of marketing that comes into play, that could be CS, that could be like you've got 3 or 4 people in a room, maybe it's a sales manager, the AE trying to close the deal, a marketer and a CS person. If you let the 4 of them have a conversation on how to get that deal closed, how different would that be than a sales manager in a one-on-one, review meeting being like, "How are you gonna get this done?" to an AE? Like, that it just explodes the possibilities of how you can get something done and absolutely delight a prospective customer and turn them into a customer rather than just getting the paperwork signed. Like, you really kick them off with a bang when you do something meaningful and impactful and empower the organization to really make that happen. And that is so exciting to me as a former marketer. It's like we could do some really cool stuff there if I just knew, if I had enough context, even on a dime. Like, give me 24 hours notice. I'll figure it out. That's the best kind of thing to do. It's so fun.
Yeah, especially now when you can just react on a dime to things that are happening on LinkedIn, and people appreciate that. Like,
Yeah.
it's just as important as price now, like
Yeah.
response times. Um, but when you're relying on individuals, like you mentioned, uh, to, like, catch that signal and then process it and then respond to it, sales is probably the only one that can do it without anybody else, like, getting involved. Nobody else has
Mhm.
the jurisdiction to try and do
Right.
that. Uh, and marketers, less and less, they don't have the capabilities to do that. They don't have the expertise. Like, their expertise is, like, go to market and understanding how to change the message. Difference
Yeah.
between a VIP webinar and, how we show up at the suite at the
Right.
sports event, right? That's what you rely on marketing for.
Yeah.
I guarantee in most cases, marketing very rarely gets, attributed.
Yeah.
And that's really where I think, like, step one is bring all the data together, like
Mhm.
all the touch points. And until you can feel that there's trust on the team, like across these boundaries, you should be hitting it like every week or
Yeah.
as often as you have closed deals, right?
Mhm.
Because not to mention, we're talking about marketing measurement. This heavily impacts the handoff between sales and CS too,
Right.
right?
I think we just stumbled into how ABM was invented. however many years ago too, because when you actually come down to it and you treat every deal like you are a company serving only that customer, that is what ABM set out to do. We've completely destroyed it with like all these different tools to operationalize it and do it at scale. But like that was never the point. The idea was to really create an individualized experience. And if we can refocus and create structures within organizations to support that focus, then we all do better. I also want to bring up another example of an Instagram ad I saw over the weekend because I spend way too much time scrolling at night. There is this drink company, and of course, CPG is different than the world we usually operate in, but it was the two founders of this drink company calling down a list of their top like 3 or 5 customers. And they got one of them to pick up. They're calling just from like a random phone number. So, of course, most people don't pick up, but one of them did. And they recorded the whole thing and then put money behind it to boost it on Instagram so that I would see it. I don't want to drink this thing, but I still think it was super cool that they had the guy who answers the emails sitting there and the founder of the company having a speakerphone conversation with their customer and saying, "Thank you so much. It means so much to us." She's talking about how she like packed an extra suitcase to take their drinks with her on vacation. And she's like, "Is your email guy even real?" He said, "Yeah, hi, that's me." And they're just connecting all of these dots. And then at the end of that, they're like, "We're going to brief on your last 2 orders and send you a whole sampling and blah, blah, blah." But the piece of that is really value first is like, sure, they're a small company trying to get traction, but they saw that value in tying paying customers, top paying customers who have regular interactions with their brand back to the top of funnel by recording the conversation and putting it in an ad. And then sort of that operations and sales piece of it is like, she keeps coming back for more, but how do we expand sales? We're going to send her samples of our new flavors. And so all of that came together in like the most perfect conversation that I listened to all 35 seconds of, or however long that ad was, because as a marketer and as a person having this conversation, it was like, that's it. You're doing it. You're still probably a 2-person company, which is why you can do this so easily, but like you're nailing it. That's exactly what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. No, that's such a great example because it's like investment in immeasurable like
Right.
activities. Obviously, they turned it into a measurable activity by
Yeah.
pumping it, with ad revenue. But they wouldn't have done that if they didn't like inherently know how valuable that content was, and it's content already being generated, and for the purpose of like customer success or customer value. uh, we have all these people tell us how loyal their customer base is. But then when we
Mhm.
talk about case studies and trying to do things to leverage that, right? It's like, no, let's just focus on like, Google ads and
Yeah.
more shows and all these things we can measure,
Mhm.
right? So that takes us into, the primary topic for next week, really honoring the unmeasurable. Um, And again, none of this will be surprising, but it's like trust and relationships and word of mouth resist quantification, right?
Mhm.
When you know how good that stuff is, what are you gonna do? Um,
Right.
so there's a way to lean into it, and we want to help you lean in more. So this was another fun one. Thanks so much, Danielle.
Yeah. Thanks for having me back. We'll see you next week.
All right, everybody, have a great week.